Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a really significant part of the healthcare world.
That's right. The market for pneumococcal vaccines.
Exactly. We've got a recent market research report here from Cognitive Market Research as our main source.
hmm
And our goal really is just to pull out the key numbers, the main trends, so you can get a clear picture of, well, where this market is and where it seems to be going.
Okay.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the first thing that jumps out is just the sheer size, and how much bigger it's expected to get.
Right.
The report suggests the global market will hit around USD 8.3 billion in 2025.
8.3 billion. Okay.
But the really interesting bit is the forecast. By 2033, they're projecting it to reach nearly USD 14.2 billion.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge jump in what, less than 10 years.
It really is.
So what's behind that? What's driving that kind of expansion?
A big factor that the report highlights is the growing issue of antimicrobial resistance, AMR.
Ah, okay, AMR.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. As common bacterial infections get tougher to treat with antibiotics,
Then preventing them becomes even more crucial.
exactly, vaccination becomes much more important. So that growing urgency is a key reason for the projected 7.00% compound annual growth rate, the CAGR.
Right, the CAGR, that 7% number.
Yeah, between 2025 and 2033, it sort of gives you the average yearly growth if it were steady. And it's worth remembering, these numbers use 2024 as the base,
Yeah.
looking back a bit and forecasting out almost a decade.
Got it. So, okay, it's a big global market, but I imagine it's not the same everywhere. How does it break down by region? Where are the hot spots?
Absolutely not uniform. Right now, North America actually holds the biggest piece of the pie.
Okay.
Over 40% of the global revenue, in fact. For 2025, their market size is estimated around USD 3.1 billion.
3.1 billion.
And growing at,
Growing at a projected annual rate of 5.5% through 2033.
okay. And within North America, is it mainly the U.S. driving that? It is, yeah. The U.S. is the dominant force there. Market size projected at 2.4 billion for 2025. The CAGR is slightly lower, 5.3%.
And why is that?
Well, likely due to the really high healthcare spending already, plus, those well-established government vaccination programs.
Right, mature market.
Exactly. Canada, though, it shows a slightly faster growth rate, 6.3%.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, with the 2025 market size around USD 367 million. Could be linked to its growing senior population, plus the universal healthcare access.
Makes sense. And Mexico?
Mexico's market, around 278 million in 2025, is also projected to grow pretty healthily, about 6.0% annually.
Okay, so North America is the current leader. How does Europe stack up?
Europe's another major player. It generates over 30% of the global revenue.
3%, okay. Similar size to North America almost.
Getting close. Their 2025 market size is estimated around USD 2.4 billion, with a projected CGR of 6.0%.
6%, okay.
And there's some, interesting variations within Europe, too. The UK, for instance, about 403 million market size, but a 6.8% growth rate.
Higher than the average for Europe.
Yeah, and Germany's even bigger in size, 474 million, growing at 6.2%. The report specifically mentions concerns about antibiotic resistance there,
Yeah.
sort of mirroring that global trend we talked about.
Right, the AMR factor again.
Definitely. And then you've got France, Russia, Spain, Italy, all pretty substantial markets too, each growing at slightly different paces.
Okay. Now, Asia Pacific, APAC. You always hear about massive growth potential there in, well, almost everything. How does it look for pneumococcal vaccines?
You're spot on. APAC currently has about 23% of the global revenue, market size roughly USD 2 billion in 2025.
2 billion. So smaller than North America and Europe right now.
Right. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
The projected key AGR for APAC is the highest globally, a really striking 9.7%.
Wow. 9.7. That's nearly double the North American growth rate.
It is. It's significant.
What's fueling that? Why so fast?
Well, China is a huge factor. 2025 market size around 833 million.
Yeah.
Projected growth of 9.2% annually.
Okay.
Things like government vaccination requirements,
Yeah.
a growing middle class with better healthcare access. Those are cited as big drivers there.
Makes sense.
But India is also showing really impressive growth. Projected KC of 11.6%.
Even higher.
Yeah. Market size around 198 million in 2025. That seems to be boosted by more investment in private healthcare, plus expanding childhood vaccination programs.
Okay.
And then you also have Japan, South Korea, Australia, other significant markets, all contributing to that really strong overall APAC growth number.
So that near double growth rate in APAC, It's not just a number, is it? It suggests maybe a shift in where the demand, maybe even innovation, might be focused in the future.
I think that's a fair assessment. It definitely highlights for you listening why it's so important to watch these emerging markets, not just the established ones.
Definitely a region to watch closely then. Okay, what about the other parts of the world? South America, Middle East, Africa. How do they fit in?
South America makes up a bit over 5% of the global market, size around 314 million in 2025, growing at 7.7% annually.
Still solid growth.
Yeah, and Brazil is the key player there. About 134 million market size, but an 8.3% CAGR. Seems driven by rising pneumonia rates and government efforts.
Okay. Middle East?
Middle East holds about a 2% share, estimated at 330 million in 2025, but with a strong projected CGR2, 8.3%. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the notable markets there.
8.3%. Interesting. And Africa?
Africa currently accounts for about 1% of the market, estimated around 182 million in 2025, with a CGR of 7.3%.
Okay.
South Africa and Nigeria are mentioned as key markets. Nigeria's growth, though, seems significantly influenced by international aid programs.
Got it. That gives us a really clear geographical map. Now let's shift gears a bit. Talk about the vaccines themselves. How does the market break down by, product type?
Well, the report suggests that Prevnar 13 is expected to stay dominant,
Prevnar 13. Okay. Why is that?
probably because it offers pretty broad protection. Covers 13 different strains or serotypes of the bacteria, so it gives a wide shield.
Right.
Plus, it's widely used in national immunization programs and also for high-risk individuals globally. That really helps its position.
So strong demand in North America, Europe?
Exactly. And access is growing in emerging markets, too. It's early entry and success navigating regulations worldwide have really cemented its place, created quite a barrier for competitors in many areas.
Okay. What about other vaccines mentioned?
Synflorix is highlighted as the fastest growing segment.
Faster growing. Why is that one taking off?
A key factor seems to be its affordability. That makes it more accessible, especially for immunization programs in lower and middle income countries.
So cost is a big differentiator there.
It seems so.
Yeah.
It has a big presence in places like Africa, Latin America, Asia Pacific, often supported by organizations like UNICEF, WH, Gavi.
Right, the global health groups helping with access.
Precisely. They play a huge role in bulk purchasing and distribution, which directly impacts Synflorix's share in those regions.
Makes sense. Any other types mentioned?
Yeah, the report also breaks things down into pediatric and adult categories for various vaccines. Mentions a PCV13 that's in the pipeline, Merck's V114, Pfizer's PCV20, the Serum Institute of India's PCV10, and also PPSV23.
Okay, quite a range there. So it seems like different vaccines are really aimed at different markets, different economic situations. How do these actually get to people, the distribution channels?
Right now, public authorities are the largest channel.
Government programs, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Governments often run the big vaccination campaigns, especially in lower income countries, often with help from those global health organizations we mentioned.
Sure.
But the report points out that wholesalers, especially in the pharmacy channel, are growing rapidly.
Oh, interesting. So moving beyond just government clinics.
Exactly. They're crucial for getting vaccines to hospitals, private clinics, local pharmacies. It increases availability outside those traditional settings, particularly in more developed nations.
So what's driving that shift towards wholesalers?
Well, it likely reflects a few things. Maybe increasing privatization of healthcare in some places, maybe a bigger focus on convenience and individual access.
Okay, and the report mentions other channels too.
Yeah, specialized companies and just an others category are also listed.
Okay, so we've got the vaccines, how they're distributed, who's actually buying them. Is it mostly governments or private sector individuals?
The public sector is currently the largest buyer. That lines up with the public authorities being the main distribution channel, right? National healthcare systems, government programs, they drive huge demand globally.
Makes sense.
But the private sector is also growing fast, especially in industrialized regions. People getting vaccines through private hospitals, clinics, maybe even their employers.
So a mix of public and private spending driving things. We touched on some growth drivers earlier, like AMR. What other key factors are pushing the market forward?
The report flags a few others. Firstly, just the simple fact that pneumococcal infections are becoming more prevalent, or at least better diagnosed, naturally boosts demand for prevention.
Okay.
Secondly, the world's population is aging, and older adults are generally more vulnerable to these infections. So that increases demand for vaccines in that group.
The geriatric factor.
Right. And finally, just ongoing progress in vaccine tech. We're getting better vaccines, offering broader protection, and that stimulates growth too.
Makes perfect sense. But surely there are roadblocks, things holding the market back.
Yeah, absolutely. The report does mention restraints. The high cost of vaccines can be a really big barrier, especially, again, in lower income countries with tight healthcare budgets.
The access issue.
Definitely. And also, the process for getting vaccines approved, the long clinical trials, the complex regulatory hurdles from bodies like the FDA in the US or the EMA in Europe that can slow down new vaccines coming to market.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. It really highlights that tension between, cutting edge pharma innovation and making sure everyone globally can actually benefit.
It certainly does.
So, looking forward then, what are the big trends shaping the future here?
Well, one key trend is definitely the ongoing development of next-gen vaccines. The report specifically names Vaxcyte's VAX24 and Pfizer's 20VPNC as examples. These aim for even broader protection.
More strains covered?
Exactly. Another important trend is the growing focus on adult vaccination programs, recognizing, that this isn't just a childhood disease.
Right, expanding beyond pediatrics. That sounds incredibly promising, potentially a real game changer.
It could be.
And who are the main companies battling it out in this market? Who leads the charge?
Pretty competitive, as you'd expect. You've got the big pharma players, GSK, who makes Inflorix, Merck & Co. with Pneumovax and Vaxneuvance, and Pfizer, of course, with their famous Prevnar series.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah. They invest a lot in R&D, launching new products, expanding globally.
Any recent moves mentioned?
The report does note some recent activity. Vaxcyte finished a phase 2 study for their 24-valent candidate back in March 2024.
Good.
The European Medicines Agency gave marketing authorization for Pfizer's 20-valent vaccine in January 2024.
Big step for them.
Yep. Lonza and Vaxcyte partnered up for commercial manufacturing last October, and the FDA approved Pfizer's Prevnar 20 for newborns back in April 2023.
So lots of activity. It really shows how dynamic and, innovative this space is right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. If we were to summarize everything we've covered, what are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive?
I'd say first, the global market is already substantial, and it's set for really significant growth in the next decade. Largely driven by that challenge of antibiotic resistance, AMR, and also the aging global population.
Right.
Second, while North America leads now, the Asia-Pacific region is where the fastest growth is happening. Definitely the one to watch.
Okay.
Third, there's a mix of different vaccine types and distribution channels catering to varied needs in regions.
And finally,
Public health initiatives, government programs, global health organizations, they remain absolutely crucial for making sure these life-saving vaccines actually get to the people who need them most.
really fascinating insights. Okay, and on that note, here's something final for you, the listener, to think about. With these next-generation vaccines coming online and this increasing focus on adult immunization, how might the whole global picture of preventable diseases actually shift over the next 10 years or so? And what role will these market dynamics we've discussed play in that transformation? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.